of 3 lectures we're going to be doing this month. Today, we're going to focus specifically on quarantine 15 and why we may be gaining weight through COVID-19. But then next week, the 12th at 5:30, we're going to talk about how to begin a weight loss journey. I'm going to introduce some of the concepts here today, but we're going to go more into depth next week. So that's going to be next Thursday, November 12th, and that's going to be at 5:30. And then the following week on November 19th, right before Thanksgiving, we're going to talk about how to stay on your successful journey of weight loss and weight maintenance. So it should be some fun topics. So please join me. So today we're going to talk about quarantine 15, and it's such an obnoxious term, I have to say, quarantine 15. I've also heard pandemic pudge. Oh my goodness, that's even worse. But why are we gaining weight during COVID? And actually, are we gaining weight? So I'm going to tell you from my practice, I'm definitely seeing my patients gain weight and have a really hard time getting it off. So I just want to give you a summary of what COVID-19 is, just so you have a full understanding of what this disease is and, what are the weight concerns during the pandemic, and of course, give some solutions. So COVID-19 is a really nasty virus, and it's called the SARS-CoV-2, Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. It is a respiratory illness, and that's why it can be transmitted via direct or indirect contact by droplet, airborne, and something called fomite. A fomite is contamination on surfaces, like elevator buttons and, you know, um, car door handles and things like that. It's also transmitted through the fecal oral route, the bloodborne route, and the animal human route. And they're thinking cats have a susceptibility to COVID. The respiratory droplet transmission can occur if a person is within 1 meter or approximately 6 feet of an infected person through the mouth, nose, and eyes. And that's why there's such a call for the masks and the social distancing. And I actually don't like to call it social distancing because that's so dismal to me. I'd rather just call it physical distancing. Social distancing almost has a connotation that we're socially unconnected, and that depresses me. So I'd rather just call it physical distancing. The symptoms are very common amongst all influenza viruses. So you might get a fever, the chills, the cough, shortness of breath, or painful breathing. You're going to have fatigue. But I can tell you that those patients of mine that have been inflicted with COVID have extreme fatigue and extreme muscle aches. I mean, to the nth degree. Headaches, sore throat. And this is interesting. Another is loss of taste or cold. But with coronavirus, we seem to be seeing that is congestion, runny nose, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. And what's interesting too is in the beginning of the whole COVID pandemic, we didn't think that COVID actually had any GI symptoms, but now research is showing that having diarrhea could actually be a symptom. So emergency warning signs would be, how severe are these symptoms? Are you really having trouble breathing where, you need to be on a ventilator or at least on oxygen? Or are you having persistent chest pain? Certainly that can cause confusion because you're not oxygenating your tissues, so your brain gets a bit fuzzy. You have the inability to either wake up or stay awake. And then you might even have something called cyanosis where you're actually turning blue because you're becoming hypoxic. You don't have enough oxygen. Now, the higher risk patients, I put older adults on this side because, well, anybody over 60 is actually at higher risk than somebody that is under 60. And then people of any age that might have something called a comorbid condition. A comorbid condition just means having some other condition like obesity, type 2 diabetes. If you already have respiratory problems like emphysema or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or asthma, you're going to be at higher risk of morbidity and mortality from COVID. If you have chronic kidney disease as well, if you have some sort of immunocompromised condition, either HIV or you've been through cancer treatments or you're a transplant patient or if you're taking any kind of kind of medications like that. If you already have existing heart conditions like coronary heart failure, coronary artery disease, if you have sickle cell disease, which is a disease of the red blood cells, and certainly if you have cancer, because you're already going to be immunocompromised with cancer. And those other conditions that might put you at higher risk would be if you have hypertension, if you have liver disease, if you're pregnant, if you're smoking. And it kind of makes sense because if your body is already struggling with other comorbid conditions and you get inflicted with some sort of infectious disease, you're going to have it worse. So, what's really scary about this disease is that it is a progressive disease, and we kind of look at it in different phases. And the first phase is when you're initially infected. And what's scary about it is that somebody might be infected with COVID, but be asymptomatic. So they're not, sneezing and having a fever or having aches. They don't even know that they're ill, but they've actually been infected. And then as the virus starts to attack something called the ACE2 cells, which are the cells in the lungs, then you start getting symptomatic. And then that progressively will get worse because of the destructive nature of the virus. It causes a lot of what's called hyperinflammation. It does invade the epithelial and the alveolar cells of the lungs, and that's why you end up in a respirator, because it's damaging the lungs so severely. The other thing it does is it causes coagulopathy, which is blood clots, so higher incidence of blood clots. And blood clots are extremely dangerous because they travel. Blood clots can travel to the lung and kill you. They can travel to the brain and kill you. So having those kinds of things are really bad. So this is a terrible virus. Even though we see that those that have a stronger immune system and the younger generation can actually fight this off, nevertheless, it's pretty dangerous and we need to take precaution. Now, as we know, and this varies from state to state, but here in the state of Florida, what did we do? We actually had different phases of being open or closed. We're all in phase 3 right now, which means that most places are open with precautions. Of course, there's a lot of controversy about that. I know that even when I go out to a restaurant, which is very rare anyway, I can't help but have in the back of my mind, uh-oh, I don't want to be that close to somebody. And it's kind of sad because, again, this is we're very social creatures, but we are on a phase 3. Now, I had written an article, this was a couple years ago, and I actually updated it just recently. It was in a magazine called Today's Dietitian, and I was talking about the effects of obesity and how obesity actually causes a higher risk for infectious disease, because being overweight or obese actually is an inflammatory disease, and it is also an immunosuppressant. So it puts you at a greater risk of illness and even death from infectious diseases, not just COVID, but even parasitic diseases and the flu and even bacteria, if God forbid you get foodborne illness or anything like that. And BMI, which stands for body mass index, which is a ratio of how much you weigh compared to how tall you are. The higher your BMI, that's actually an independent risk factor for the severity of your symptoms and complications from COVID. So when you go to the doctor, oftentimes the nurses will get your height, get your weight, and then calculate your BMI. A normal BMI is anywhere between 18.5 to 24.9. And then as you are gaining weight, you're going into the overweight category, which would be 25 BMI to 29.9. And then obesity has different stages, stage 1, 2, and 3. So an obesity stage 1 is having a BMI of 30 to 34.9. And then as you get worse, 35 to 39.9 is category 2. And then category 3, as you can see, it's going up and up. So that's what BMI is. So the impact of COVID, unfortunately, has not only taken a toll on our health, in other ways as well. Many patients and many clients, I can tell you because I still work in a hospital, a lot of people are putting off their wellness visits. They're putting off their colonoscopies. They're putting off their mammograms. And that's not good because the earlier detection of some of these other conditions is what really improves your outcome. And people aren't coming out. And although I do understand that, I try to encourage them to come out and talk to their primary care physicians and their hospitals. We put so many precautions. I work at the hospital, and I'm telling you, I feel much safe, very safe at the hospital compared to when I even go, to the gas station. Emotional concerns for sure. There's a lot of isolation. I actually still have a patient that has been isolated in her apartment since March, and she is so petrified. I mean, I think some of it is maybe an unrealistic um, fear, but nevertheless, she just does not want to come out, and we're trying to get her some emotional help. Financial concerns. I have a lot of people that I know of that have lost their jobs, or they're furloughed, or their hours have been cut. They're spending more money, and that they don't have because they're, just ordering food in instead of making it themselves. So, we're having problems there. And of course, the uncertainty of it all. Is it getting worse? Is it getting better? And of course, we see the numbers going up. So we're thinking, oh my gosh, it's getting worse. And now that winter is upon us, it's going to be exacerbated by just the normal flu season and cold season. So, we're all on pretty much high alert. But getting back to the weight gain, believe it or not, about 22% of the American population admits to gaining weight during the pandemic lockdowns. And I haven't, my family, either half my family lives in England and the other half lives in Korea. And I'm telling you that England is already shut down again. They're shut down until they're going to be reevaluating that till December 2nd. So I'm telling you, these countries that have these shutdowns are having these weight problems as well. Research polls show that nearly half of women and a quarter of men admit to gaining weight during the quarantine and COVID pandemic. And a WebMed survey found that people gained an average of 8 pounds in the last 3 months. And that's about right. When my patients come to see me, I'm seeing a weight gain anywhere between 7 to 12 pounds. And that's in a couple of months. And that's a lot of weight actually in a very short amount of time. And it just also shows the durability of the body and how it wants to store calories. So, why is this happening? We're off routine. We still are. There are abnormal sleeping and waking patterns. I have a lot of friends of mine are now working from home. So even that has changed in terms of the dynamics. They're not, getting up a certain time of the day and getting in their car and driving. Maybe they lost their job. There's a lot of stress eating. And that's what I see as a nutritionist. We don't just eat because we're hungry. That's what animals do. That's what my dog does. But we humans are eating because we're eating for pleasure. We're eating because of our emotions. We're eating because of memories. We're eating because of culture and holidays and parties. So we're eating, for so many other reasons. A big thing too is we're a snacking society. And unfortunately, that's really one of the, I wouldn't say number one, but that's one of the major causes of weight gain in the United States. And what's very interesting is that we snack and we teach our kids at an early age to snack. I mean, kids are in preschool, they play around and then they have a snack. Or if, your kid got an A on their test, oh, let's go have ice cream. Or your kid is screaming in the car, oh, okay, let's go to McDonald's. I mean, we're always using food as a reward or as a snack. And so we're kind of ingrained that way. And marketing knows that. And that's why, usually around prime time, they have all these yummy commercials on for, pizza and burgers and all the stuff that looks really good on TV. And then we kind of get bored and we're sitting there watching TV and we want to eat something. So, like I said, we're not eating just because we're hungry. We're also seeing an increase in alcohol intake. We're seeing an reduced activity because people aren't going to the gym or not going outside. And we actually don't know if the actual virus, the actual COVID virus, actually causes weight gain. And I'm going to show you in a second that we do have evidence that other viruses can be linked to weight gain. So, when you look at some of these things, which of these contributing factors are within your control to change? Well, if the virus actually causes weight gain, there's really not much we can do there in terms of the genetic level, but we can be empowered to change our activity, to not drink as much, to not snack as much, to change our food choices, be aware of our stress eating. furloughed or job loss. All right, let's get a job. If we're working from home, still stay on a pattern. So we're going to talk about some solutions. But first, I wanted to talk about this just because I found it so interesting. There are some viruses that we know of that actually cause the weight gain. And the biggest one that's studied is the adenovirus that we just call ADV36. And this is the virus that causes the common cold. Um, and researchers at the University of Wisconsin, they had begun to experiment with chickens and mice and monkeys. And what they found were when they infected these animals with this virus, they actually increased their body fat by 50 to 150%. And that was without changing their diets. I mean, how crazy is that? So a virus is actually causing you to gain weight. And how does it actually do that? Well, I'm going to tell you in a minute. There have been some human studies. There was a comparative study that showed that those people that had antibodies to the common cold virus, what they did was they measured the antibodies and they said, okay, these people were exposed to this virus. And what they found was that antibodies of this virus were found in 30% of obese individuals compared to only 11% of lean individuals. Now, that's not a direct correlation of anything, but it was just a very curious, relationship to show that those that have obesity, you know, had history of being infected with this common cold virus. So hopefully they're doing some more investigation there. So how does it actually make us fat? How does this virus, what does it do? Well, the actual virus makes fat from bringing in more glucose from the blood. So remember, glucose is that blood sugar, and you always have to have a certain amount of blood sugar in your body to function because your body needs energy. And what the virus was actually doing is, sucking up this glucose and using it for its own self. And the virus also actually increases the number and size of fat cells. So it was almost like causing its own reserve. So that's why that was the relationship between how this virus causes weight gain. So maybe the good news is we still don't, we can't say that the COVID virus does that, but I'm hoping some of the obesity researchers out there are actually looking at it. So, what are some associated issues related to weight gain? Why is it such a big issue? And, I know we know this, but science estimates that even a mere 10% increase in your weight puts you at risk for weight related conditions. Now, 10% is not much, right? I don't know math, but I know 10% isn't that much. It's going to increase your risk of pre-diabetes, which can transform into diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, and those three things can lead to heart disease, joint pain, which will exacerbate inability to exercise, and then that's going to increase weight. Sleep apnea actually increases your risk of a stroke. You're not breathing or you actually stop breathing while you're sleeping, and about 60 other conditions related to overweight and obesity. Overweight and obesity actually affects every single organ system of your body, every single one. We've got 11 organ systems, and there's not one system that it wouldn't inflict some sort of condition. So, just think about that. Now, on the flip side of that, that also means that if you can lose 7 to 10% of what you gained, that's going to confer health. And if you needed to lose more than that, getting up to that 20% weight loss is going to help you even more. So, what are we eating? Well, surveys are showing that we've had a 266% increase in candy. And that was actually taken before Halloween. So I'm sure this number has gone up. 54% increase in bread, 36% increase in noodles or pasta, 40% increase in any kind of baked item, 55% increase in alcohol sales. So what is that telling us? Well, we're consuming more sugar, carbs, fat, and alcohol, while at the same time exercising less. So really, what are you expecting your body to do? I try to tell my clients and my patients, look, it's not personal, it's physiology. And we're very fluid organisms. We're going to respond to the environment, our internal environment. So if you're going to feed it fat and sugar and alcohols, which are very calorically dense and nutrient poor, your body's going to say, oh, okay, I guess they want me to store fat. So that's what it does. When you look at things like fat, remember, fat is very calorically dense. It has 9 calories per gram. That's a lot. And alcohol is right behind it. Alcohol has 7 calories per gram. Sugar and protein and carbs are about the same, about 4 calories per gram. So, research also shows that under stress, the human bodies actually secrete stress hormones. And I'm sure you know that, right? Cortisol, adrenaline, remember the fight or flight hormones. And what happens is more glucose is released from the liver. And what that's going to do is actually increase your cravings for sweets and fats. So not only might you have the mental or hedonic desire to have sweets and fat, because sweets and fat make you feel good, it tastes good, you want it, but also these stress hormones are causing your physiology to want it. And I think that's, again, one of those protective mechanisms. Maybe we have to run away from Tyrannosaurus Rex, and we have to get more energy to do so. So that's why the body's set up that way. This is just a very interesting tidbit. At least I thought it was interesting. Even insects will do that. So, a Yale University study showed that grasshoppers will turn to sugar plants when under stress instead of eating more of those plants that are higher in protein. So, I guess we're like grasshoppers. So let's just go to alcohol and calories a little bit. I know alcohol is a very important component of our culture and our social life, and it's fun to drink and it's enjoyable, but you also have to keep that under control too. I mean, one glass of wine, which is about 5 ounces, is about the calorie count of a slice of bread. A pint of beer is about a bag of popcorn, a pint of cider, about slice of cheese pizza, but of course it depends what pizzeria you go to because some of those slices are really big. A margarita, about enough calories like a bagel. A pina colada, which is a very fatty drink. We equate that to about 4 ounces of French fries. And a mojito is about 1.75 ounces of chips. So not only does it have calories, look at all these other things that have calories. Now, of course, certain drinks have less calories, like let's see. So this shot of, I don't know, bourbon or whiskey, 105 calories per shot. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, it's only 100 calories, right? Okay, so the other thing that we have to take into consideration is alcohol is metabolized very differently than other foods. And what happens is it actually can be metabolized very close to a sugar or a fat. And your body kind of shuts down the ability to use other nutrients for energy until all this alcohol is out of your system. So when you have a really nice glass of wine with your beautiful steak dinner, you're really not metabolizing any of that steak dinner for energy until that alcohol is out of your body. And in that case, sometimes you're storing it. So that's why alcohol isn't really treated the same way as food. But these calories can rack up, especially if you like these fancy drinks. That starts to rack up. The other thing you have to keep in mind too is alcohols, some drinks are very high in sugar as well. So, when you're picking your drink, what I would say is if you're drinking alcohol, stay to what we call moderation, right? Which is 1 drink for women and 2 drinks for men. Be choosy on what you're drinking. Maybe you can do a low calorie beer or a low carb beer, or if you're doing a hard liquor, and you like to mix your drink, maybe instead of doing a rum and coke, maybe do a rum and diet coke, so kind of be creative so you can shave off calories. What else can we do? When you look at, how we can get into a weight management, or weight loss, you got to think about what those options are. So there are weight loss medications. I'm actually going to talk about that next week, just so you have the option of what they are. Diet and healthy eating pattern, behavior and support for sure, and physical activity. But it's really interesting. Even though physical activity is super important to maintain weight loss and build muscle mass, really when you look at intake, that's what's really going to affect weight loss more. And I am like perfect proof of that. I cycle a lot. And yet, if my calories are going above what I need, even with cycling, I'm going to gain weight. So, what are some things that we can do to regain control? Well, the first thing is to just be calm. If you've gained weight, don't put your head in the sand. I want you to, admit it. You need to get on the scale. I know even my patients, they don't want to get on the scale. Well, if you don't get on the scale, you're putting your head in the sand. Let's find out exactly how much you gained. It's not a judgment. Okay, it's physiology. So we need to get back on routine, and that includes sleeping and waking. We like to stay up late and wake up late. Well, if that's always been your routine, then that's your routine. But if now you've changed your routine, your hormones are trying to adjust, and maybe your hormones are not liking that, and you're actually hanging on to some fat. You got to exercise. If you're afraid to go out, I have some apps here. Um, we're going to talk about our meal choices and our food choices, and definitely get support. I think we're very competitive organisms. So if you can get some sort of competition going on, that's definitely support. You have to find your intrinsic motivation, what actually motivates you to want to lose weight. Most of us know what to do, right? Decrease calories, exercise more. You know what to do, but it's the motivation to actually stay on track to do it. That's what you have to work on. The other thing too is try to break the cycle of stress. I don't know about you, but I just got to turn off the TV. There is just way too much going on TV that's just not fun to listen to, and it really does stress me out. I realize that it really, really does. So if I'm going to put on the TV, it's going to be for some, romance movie or something that makes me happy, some sort of comedy. Otherwise, I'm keeping the TV off. Meditation is always good. Even if you can't do the hardcore meditation, meditation can even be just sitting in a dark room and trying not to think about anything. Try it. Read a book. You know, Reading a book is so amazing. It's even better than the TV because our imagination is just so much better than actually what we're seeing on TV. So read a book. Gardening, I know that's one of my techniques. I like to landscape. I'm not really into flowers because I kill them all the time, but I really love planting plants that I can eat. So I like to landscape. It's very peaceful for me. I can kind of get into that hypnotic meditative state. Cleaning, I have lots of clients that they have the cleanest house in the world. That's really what comforts them. Don't forget about self-care. If just getting into the bathtub and soaking is your thing, go for it, or cutting your hair or getting a manicure. Self-care is extremely important. Changing your clothes. I even have some patients, I'm telling you, they're in their house, they're quarantined, and they stay in their pajamas all day. You know what? No, don't do that. Go take a shower and get dressed. And that really does something for the psyche as well. And like I said, you got to sleep, you got to find support, and definitely be truthful with yourself. Let's not start, continue to just say, all right, it's COVID, it's pandemic, it's lockdown, I can't do these things, and just keep using that as an excuse to not change any of our behaviors. The other thing we have to do is meal plan. Some of you might be going out, some of you might be cooking or having food delivered in, but try to meal plan the best you can. Um, that really is another technique because you're in control with what you're choosing. If you're going shopping to the grocery store, try to make a shopping list because the grocery stores know that most people don't do a shopping list, and they know that, so they're putting all the tempting foods all over the place. At one time I would say, don't only shop, go to the aisles that you need items. If you need milk, go to the milk aisle. But now what's happening is these supermarkets markets are putting all these tempting things in the aisles. So before you even get to the milk aisle, you're already running into the freshly baked pies and the bread and the buy one get one freeze. And it's all about marketing, and they know that. Try to eat nutritious foods. It doesn't mean you can't have some junk foods in there, but just be careful of certain trigger foods. Trigger foods would be foods that you prefer over healthy foods. But having said that, also be careful of healthy foods because those have a lot of calories. I have a patient that says, "Oh yeah, well I'm eating, fruit and nuts and cheese." Okay, yeah, those are healthy foods, but even 2 ounces of nuts is going to give you, over 300 calories and a lot of fat. So portion control is important. Something called mindful eating. We're going to talk more about this next week, actually. Mindful eating is just like what it's saying. You're being mindful about your food choices. You're being mindful about how the food tastes and how you're eating it. So we'll talk more about that next week. You need to go back to what works for you. Many of us have dieted, and next week I'll give you the statistics to show you exactly how many people are dieting in this way. Hey, I've got job security, right, as a nutritionist, because we're always dieting. Try to avoid the fad diets. What is a fad diet? A fad diet is something that's going to promise you something that you cannot maintain. And in the process, it might actually hurt you. So avoid those fad diets and extremely strict diets, but we'll give you some suggestions on what diets might be the best. Also, avoid what my psychologist calls the stinkin' thinking. The stinkin' thinking is the thinking of the avoid, the all or nothing kind of thought. Okay, well, that most of the time doesn't work within a lifestyle. If I had said to, my Caribbean patient, you can never have rice again. Okay, well, that's not going to work. Rice is part of the culture. Rice is part of what this person grew up with. So is there a way that we can just reduce it or change the product from, white rice to brown rice? It's a lot of modification. You got to stay positive. Take it as a challenge, take it as a journey. Don't be on bated breath looking at that scale. Oh my gosh, it's not moving, because it's going to move when it's signaled to move, not when you want it to move. 1 pound at a time. That's the other thing I see too. We can gain weight a lot faster than we can lose weight. And that's not your fault. That is the way physiology is. We're very protective organisms based on genetics of millions of years. So to lose weight is not something the body likes to do. It rather would gain weight and hold on to it. So the frustrating thing is you put all this effort in making changes, which seems so big to you because they're sacrifices, and yet you get on the scale and it doesn't move, or maybe it moves 1 pound because you're thinking with all the sacrifice you're making it should be 5 pounds. Doesn't work that way. So you actually have to be very realistic. Just have a goal of maybe 1 to 2 pounds a week, and if that doesn't happen, you just have to reevaluate what you might be doing. I actually have a client that I worked with, and I know that it was really frustrating for her because she wouldn't lose weight for weeks. And then for some reason, at about the fifth week, she would drop about 3 to 5 pounds. It was really interesting. And again, it wasn't her fault. It wasn't that she wasn't following the guidelines. It doesn't mean I was a bad dietitian. It just means that that was the way her physiology worked. So it took her a little while to get to her goal weight, but she finally got to it. Her body responded when it wanted to respond. Definitely get professional support if you need it. Ask your primary care physician, go to your primary care physician or have a virtual visit to say, look, I've gained weight. What can I do? And have them send you to a nutritionist or maybe to a weight management program. You've got to self monitor your weight, but also your intake. And I know it might seem so, oh my gosh, I don't want to write down what I eat. But I have to tell you, if you don't do that, you think you know what you're eating and you really don't. And I'm being really honest. I'm a dietitian. I've been a dietitian for, almost 20 years. I'm really smart when it comes to nutrition. But when I start tracking myself, that's when I can realize, man, oh man, I can't believe I ate that many calories. But you're not only tracking calories, you're tracking your macros too, because maybe your calories are fine, but what makes up the calories is not good. Maybe your fat intake is too much, or maybe you're eating too many Twinkies, so your sugar is too high. So self monitoring is really good. It's empowerment, it's self realization on what you're doing. And then you can make meaningful changes instead of just guessing and saying, oh, okay, well, let me just get rid of this, because getting rid of this might not be mindful to your body. So definitely self monitor your weight and your intake. If you can avoid weighing yourself every day, that would be good. I usually recommend my patients weighing themselves once a week, usually around the same day, the same time, the same way, just so that would be a better indicator. If you weigh yourself every single day, you're not really accounting for certain fluid shifts. And it could get very frustrating. And I know that sometimes we're numbers driven. So if you get on that scale after sacrificing that beautiful dinner last night and nothing moved, it's a buzzkill, and then it might actually influence your behavior for that day. You might just say, forget about it. Let me just eat the ice cream because I'm making these changes and it's not even working. So be careful with that kind of mentality. These are just some food tracking apps. These are free. I love Baritastic Food Tracker. This is actually specifically made for my patients who have bariatric surgery, but I put it up here too because anybody can use it, even if you didn't have bariatric surgery. When you get on, It's an app, so you type in Baritastic Food Tracker. It'll probably ask you for a hospital code, but just say no, you don't have one. You can make up numbers if you want to, but it's really user friendly, and it's going to have like blogs and recipes and reminder buttons. I really like the reminder buttons. It has a food diary so you can track yourself. So I really like that one. I really like MyFitnessPal as well. The one thing that I really love about MyFitnessPal is it has such a huge database of food. Even if you put cultural and ethnic foods in there, you can usually find it. So I really, really like MyFitnessPal too. So I put these other ones up there, but the first two are the ones that I really like. And I personally use both of those. They're very user friendly to use and they're free. MyFitnessPal does have also a paid feature. It's a premium feature, but quite honestly, I've done that one, and to me, it was a waste of money. So, but if you want to really have the ability to change things around and add recipes, you can certainly do that too. The other thing we can do is definitely resume or start exercise or physical activity. Some of us might have a hard time doing that, whether if it's a physical reason or you're still very cautious about going out and intermingling, even though we have social distancing or physical distancing. But then do something in the house. Like I see somebody doing stretches. I like that. Very good. So if you can stretch, if you can do chair exercises, I'm sure the fitness center can give you some other tips. Any kind of movement, don't call it exercise if that freaks you out, because sometimes calling it exercise is like, oh my gosh, I don't want to exercise. All right. So just move more. How's that? Just use more physical activity. Just keep walking back and forth from your living room to your bedroom. Just keep moving around. These are just some exercise apps that are really fun. I know that I have a client who's a very high powered attorney. He does not have time for anything, and yet he really does enjoy exercise. So he does the 7-minute workout. He also wanted to try yoga. So I shared this yoga for beginners app with him. I do have some patients. We don't really have hiking trails here in terms of hills, but the parks are open and you can be physically distant from all the other people out there. So maybe that's something that you might want to do. So these are just some exercise apps that can help keep you on track there. The other thing is we do have to set realistic goals. Goal setting is really important, and I think that's what really drives the behavior. I don't think we do enough to sit and think about, well, what is our ultimate goal? All we say is, oh, yeah, we want to lose weight. So I'm going to give you some tips next week on how we can goal set. There's something called the SMART framework, and that actually teaches you how to set goals. Um, you know, and when I say realistic, maybe it could be maybe it has nothing to do with your weight. Maybe it could just be, okay, I'm going to get rid of all the ice cream in the house. That's your goal. Okay. And you're going to give yourself 1 to 2 weeks to do it. And hopefully it's not, okay, I'm going to eat all the ice cream and get rid of it. Maybe it's just, I'm really going to give it away or throw it out. Okay. So think about very simplistic goals in the beginning. And remember that weight loss and weight gain is the cumulative effect of change. So if you're going to cumulatively do negative caloric balance, then you're going to lose weight. If you're doing things that increase your calories, you're going to gain weight. I think what is the reality really? Stress is a part of life. When it's not COVID, it's going to be something else. It's going to be a hurricane or it's going to be some other economic crash, whatever. Always have a plan B. That's what life is. Support is 90% of it, or maybe more. Maybe you have a group of friends, your spouse, your significant other. That's really important. I find competition a really good thing to motivate me. Needs to be a holistic approach. Try not to approach this as just numbers. I have to do this and then get on the scale. Try to look at it more of, you want to make yourself healthy from the inside out. And that means being healthy emotionally, being healthy psychologically, being healthy socially, being healthy physically, choosing foods that actually nourish the health. Try to approach it maybe in a different way. Take one day at a time. Hey, if you fall off and you really did eat that half a gallon of ice cream, okay, you ate it, don't feel guilty about it. When you feel guilty about it, it's almost like you regret your decision. It was your decision to do it. Be empowered. You made that decision. But You got to remember, decisions always have consequences. And if you don't like the consequence, then you have to make a change. So that means the next day, you're not eating half a gallon of ice cream. So that's what your change is. And then definitely join me over the next 2 weeks. We're going to get a little bit deeper into, why do we diet? How do we diet? How do I even start? What would, how do you do it? Even though dieting seems so successful, I can tell you by the statistics, we're very unsuccessful. When you look at the overweight obesity statistics of the United States and globally, it's craziness. We are just getting larger and larger, and this pandemic didn't help the cause. So hopefully you'll join me. All right. So do you guys have any questions for me about COVID, about weight gain, weight loss? Don't be shy. Oh, great. Tell me. No questions? Next week you'll have questions, right? So I think just overall, the pandemic, it's caused definitely us to get off routine. So I think,
I
like I
got a
said,
question when you get a
oh,
chance.
tell me. Yeah, tell me, who's this?
I've gone to many dietitians over my life.
Yeah.
I usually was pretty thin most of my life. I'm only 5'2", and I was usually around 120 or so. And over the last few years with stress, I've been getting up to 135, 140.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gone to dietitians. The problem maybe that I have is I still work. I was taking care of a wife with Alzheimer's and a mother.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
have time to really, and I don't like to cook. So I would go
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Are any of those, I don't know if you want to call them delivery things, healthy fresh or home fresh,
Yes.
those
Yes.
things where you don't have to spend a lot of time cooking, because I really don't have a lot of spare time working and being a caregiver.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are any of those reasonable and not too time consuming that would help with weight, management?
Yes. Yes. And the answer is yes.
Okay.
And what I love about them is that you can get foods that are already prepared, so you don't have to cook them, or you can get like a hybrid one where you can get the ingredients and then whip it up real quick. So it depends on
Probably
what you
more
want.
like
But I
the
think the point is,
ones you're talking about. Are they generally healthy and, or
yeah, there are some that are not so healthy in the sense that they might use a lot more sodium or a lot more fat. I think in next week's presentation, I do have the list. Are you going to be with me next week?
Yeah, I am. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
perfect.
not working the next 2 months because tax season is over.
Oh,
So
there we go. Okay.
10 months are hard. 2 months I get to relax a little. So
Good for you. Good for you. That's all part of health too, relaxing, taking a breather.
yeah,
But
and
to
I'm
answer your
sorry, I never
question,
liked to cook. I never was big at it.
yeah,
And
that's okay. That's okay. And what's really nice though is that even if you go to, Whole Foods or Publix or things like that, they can have healthier prepared foods that are already prepared.
okay,
Rotisserie
yeah.
chicken. Maybe you can go to, if you eat fish, you go to the fish area. I know that I remember when there was Winn-Dixie. I don't think there's any
Well, I'm a
Winn-Dixie
Publix
anymore.
guy, but even
Publix,
cooking
yeah.
salmon,
Yeah,
it take you a while, just
right.
really
Right.
putting it in the oven and cooking and then cleaning it up, all the
Yeah.
grease. I mean,
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
I'm complaining, but it's just like I'm trying to find a way to be healthier, but without really, getting
Right.
into messy cooking and stuff like that.
See, you make a really good
And
point.
I was active. I used to be more active, but the older I get, the harder it is, especially when you work a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's why if you're sitting at a desk, you can get one of those little steppers underneath your desk, or you can get some rubber bands that you can tie around your legs and do leg lifts. I mean, people at my clinic think I'm crazy because I'm sitting there doing, arm lifts and stuff, whatever you can capture. But I
Okay.
think you make a really good point. The point you're making is, look, you got to fit it into your lifestyle. If I said, okay, start cooking, you're not going to do that. It's not really what you want to do, and it's not your thing, and that's okay. So it's all about finding places that can deliver healthful meals. And yes, there are places out there. I have a list for you. I don't have all of them on the top of my head because I want to make sure I give you the good ones.
Okay.
But yes, the answer is yes. And they are portion controlled. That's what's nice about them. And a lot of these places have, you know, appropriate meals based on your health as well. Some of them have low sodium meals, some of them have low fat meals, so they give you choices as well. And I
Okay.
think I think that's why places like Nutrisystem and those kinds of Jenny Craig, those things were successful, and they're still successful because it does come with a meal plan. Now those meal plans have gotten healthier, which is good. When they first came out back in the 80s, dietitians were kind of snobbish and saying, "Oh my gosh, they're not so healthy." But because everybody's into more health, they have gotten much better in terms of the choices. And some of my patients like the taste of them. So am I going to tell her not to do Jenny Craig when it works for her? No. So she's going to do it.
Right.
So yes, the answer is yes, you can do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Yep. Any other questions? That was such a good question. So I think for now, I know COVID is going up. Please stay safe, wear your mask, wash your hands, do what we've been doing for months and just be very diligent and vigilant about it. Don't let your guard down. This is also flu season as well. Get your flu shot. If you have any symptoms, call your doctor. Just be safe. Again, we don't live in a sterile environment, so just keep yourself safe, okay? Because I want to see you all next week. All
Thank you.
right, you guys. My pleasure. Thank you again.